Eddie, this is, everybody here is either a current mayor or previous mayor.
That's correct.
My understanding is that y'all get together once a month and have a former mayor's club.
Republican Mayor's Club.
Republican mayors. Is that correct?
We do.
Is that today?
No, that's not today.
Whose turn
No,
was
it's
it?
Gary. If you think it's Gary's turn, what he's referring to there is we rotate who pays for the lunch that day.
Oh.
And Gary's been known to have a nickname
One of them's a
of
little slower than the other.
Tightwad.
Every
Every time
And
we
now-
turn around,
now
it's my
let-
turn.
No, let me say something. Tightwad has served him well, really, especially in this last election. People liked the idea that he was sitting on the lid, not spending any extra money, was against a tax increase.
He won't raise taxes and he
Right.
won't pay for lunch.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
It really is. From a guy that's not in public office, that's a big deal.
Well, hopefully it's important to people like you that are not in office, that have jobs and businesses and so forth. Hopefully.
And we try to eat heavy.
When Gary pays.
Where do y'all go?
We rotate around.
Well, it's my turn as Crystal. But
No,
Somebody's-
we've been to Jenkins and we've been to Big Tom's. We've been to Couch's Barbecue. and
Willie's.
What's the one you
Willie's.
took me to the last time? I'd never been there before. Pokey's.
Been to Pokey's.
Somebody
Pokey's is a good place to eat
somebody
for lunch.
started
You
the
never
rumor.
been to Pokey's?
Somebody started the rumor that if the Church of God guy says the blessing, I have to pay for it.
So he won't
He
pray.
put it on the Church of God bills, what we were referring
I don't know who
to.
started that rumor. It's happened more than once.
No, I'll say this about the group. We've had a lot of fun. We enjoy shooting the bull with each other and digging a little bit at each other, but we can talk serious if we really need to, which is not very often. But
Now, didn't the group go to Couches on Fridays? That's not this same group.
no,
That was
no.
Max Carroll and
Yeah, that
Bill
was.
Hester.
It was kind of a.
Kenneth Stanley.
Harlan
Yeah,
Bainer.
it was an old throwback group,
Yeah.
but we used to go on Fridays.
But that was our best lunch. I think it was the first lunch.
It was the first.
Mr. Cartwright
Eddie.
in the judge's Cadillac, Judge Mashburn's Cadillac,
Right.
picked us all up at Tom and I at City Hall. We swung around the courthouse and picked up Mayor Davis at the county office. And the four of us rode together in that classic car down to Couches. And the car ride was as fun as the hour we spent in the restaurant.
It was a lot more fun when Max was driving.
You remember, Tom, there was a lady that worked down there.
Miss Hackett.
Yeah, and
Miss
she
Hackett.
was a Pentecostal lady.
Very much so.
She would not wait on you in a pair of slacks. She wore a dress. And
Now, where was this at?
This was at Couches.
She's
And
working
Max-
she's working over at a place over on Gun Barrel Road now,
Really?
and you can recognize her voice when she's paging somebody.
Well, Max Carroll would find an empty Budweiser can, and he'd take it in with him, and he'd set it on the table. Well, she wouldn't come wait on him as long as that can was there. She said, no, don't want anything to
Well,
do with any beer.
we brought a beer license to her one time, and she refused to even put her hands on it.
Oh, well.
Good times.
Well, when Dee first talked about us getting together here on the discussion, why, I said, well, I know a few questions to ask. And I thought we'd start, Dee, if it suits you, with who, how, and why, and being how did we get into politics and who talked us in and who helped us and all that sort of thing. And I figured that Tom served longer than anybody. We let him start.
Well, I started out as a candidate for sheriff in the wrong party. And
That being the Democrat Party,
That's
let's
correct.
clear that up.
and I won the primary, and Wendell
Who'd you beat in the primary?
Ralph Cartwright.
Yeah, Ralph Cartwright.
Oh,
He never got
Uncle
over that.
Ralph.
Your
Right.
cousin.
Cousin.
Cousin. Democrat cousin.
He never
I
got
like
over it.
Ralph.
No.
Never got over it.
We kidded him. Let me
Because
interrupt.
I'd only lived here
We
less than 2
kidded
years.
him about, we used to tell him, Tom just lived here 6 months, but the golden voice beat you, and it just killed him.
Oh, he didn't like that at all. Anyway, Wendell Davis became one of my best friends. He was elected sheriff of Bradley County. And then I was appointed as Commissioner of Fire, Parks, and Recreation for 6 months when Kenneth Tinsley resigned. And as far as I knew, that was my first venture into politics after the sheriff's race. But it got to be a lot of fun, and a lot of people encouraged me to run, and I did. And it's all been sort of history after that.
Who did you run against that first time?
Lady, can't think of his name, can't think of her name. She was a lady, and she really worked hard. And the eye doctor.
Dr. Horner?
Dr. Horner. Wasn't Dr. Horner. It was...
Duncan.
No, it wasn't Duncan. Well, y'all forgive me trying to remember stuff, but it wasn't Dr. Horner, but he was close to him. So there we are.
Okay, and you served how many years?
27.
27.
Plus
did you ever
plus
have an opponent after that first
yes,
race?
I did have.
Do
But every other time I had an opponent.
Were you one of them that Grover Rice ran against?
No,
Okay.
he ran before I did, I believe.
He ran for all three positions that
At
were
one
open.
time.
To city commission
same
and the
time?
mayor at the same time.
He
Did
sure
he win
did.
any of them?
Didn't win any of them. I remember that.
So he went fishing.
Didn't he get
He
kicked?
did go fishing on election day.
Yeah, and he ended up.
I don't know if we're supposed to talk about.
I was on city commission.
Is that when he got killed?
I
Did
don't
he get
remember.
killed in a
Yeah,
boat?
he drowned
Yeah,
by himself fishing.
yeah.
But I was on city commission, I remember, and Harry Deathrow was the mayor, and he gave Harlan Painter a hard time because
He gave everybody a hard time.
But it was not because it was not in the city ordinances that you could run for three. And needless to say, Painter got on the ball and included that in the city ordinance, and now you can
can't
just
run.
run for one.
So he didn't win any of them.
Then I remember Corky Whitlock interviewed him after the race, and Grover was all upset. He'd lost all three of them. And he said, just want the general public to know, all you folks that lied to me, old Grover will be laying in the weeds down the road waiting on you. I never forgot that.
Were there many lies told?
I don't
In
remember.
politics?
I'm sure there wasn't.
You ever stop to wonder if he'd have won all three of them?
Think
Yeah,
about
what would happen?
Which one do you choose?
I don't.
Well,
you-
he'd have
you-
chosen. He wanted to be the mayor. He wanted to be the mayor. I knew Grover pretty well, and
He ran for a state office too, didn't he?
He did.
State rep or something like that.
Didn't he used to eat at the liar's table? I was probably
Well, he ate
15
down
years
most
old,
of
14.
the time. When I was at the courthouse, he ate and had coffee at Diamond Lil's.
Diamond Lil's on the square.
his daughter taught school at
Right.
Cleveland High.
Right.
She's still alive.
I don't know. She might be.
Now Harlan was your big tipper.
I don't know about that.
He likes the dime or 25 cents.
Wow.
Uh,
How about you, Mr. Cartwright, when you were elected?
well, let's go to Gary next.
I thought we were going to do it by
In,
We're
in
going
order.
down the road.
what got us into politics. Well, mine, it would take longer to tell, and I don't want to.
No, we won't. Well, that's okay. Tell it all.
We got plenty of time.
Yeah,
we want to
tell
know
it.
all the great.
Yeah, all
Details.
the dirty stuff and the clean stuff and the in between.
Well, first, I ran for county commission. I don't know if I should start there or not, but I'll mention it briefly. Bobby Burris was the commissioner in my district, and I'd heard a rumor that he might not be going to run. So I called him up, and he verified. He said, "No, I'm not going to. You ought to run for it." So to make a long story short, I ran for commission, had a primary battle, and then I had to turn around and do it again in the August election. But I won the election and got sworn in and served a month. And then Goldie, my boss, I worked at the Banner, had been there for about 15 years, called me in the office, and he said, I want you to quit that blankety-blank county commission job. And I said, I've worked too hard. There's no way I can quit, Goldie. And he said, well, turn in your keys then. So right there on a Friday afternoon, I was jobless.
Did you just hand them to him like,
I
or did you?
can't say publicly
I
how the
can't-
conversation
I
went at
can't
that
believe
point,
Goldie.
But do that.
If you know Goldie, yeah. So yeah, right there on the spur of the moment, it was the last day of the month. The next day I had no insurance from a family or anything. Anyway, I turned in the keys, I left, and basically worked as full-time commissioner there for a while, so like Tom did for mayor. And ended up going back to radio and working that. During that time as on the commission,
Where'd you go radio? Which station? And
well, I had started out, and we didn't ask for the history there, but I'd started out in WBAC right out of high school and worked at WBAC for several years. And then I managed my brother's clothing store, the Village Esquire, for a couple of years. And then I went to the Banner, and I'd been there for about 15 years. And during the time I was at the Banner, I handled almost everybody, all elected officials' campaigns, except Mr. Cartwright's. I don't know why I didn't do his, but at one time, almost every elected official, I had handled their campaign. I'm trying to talk fast because there's a lot of years here. But anyway, while serving on the county commission, it became obvious, at least in my opinion, that we had a county executive that really didn't do anything much. I had worked on her campaigns also over the years, but so anyway. After
This was a lady.
Yeah.
it was a female. Let's don't call her a lady. Go ahead.
So after 4 years on the commission, I remember I went home one day and I said, Sonia, I'm not running for re-election. She said, why? You love the commission job. And I said, it's not worth it. It's 4 more years with the county executive that we have now. I'm going to go find somebody to run against her. So I started going around, and I was truly honest because I had a job. I wasn't looking for a job. Asking people, what do you think? Who do you think would be good to run for this? And one of the first people I talked to was Red Dockery. He had been the county trustee. He was somebody I thought the world of. I never will forget. I met him at Hardee's one morning for coffee, and after about an hour-long conversation, he basically said, well, I think you ought to run, Gary. And I said, well, I'm not trying to get support from me. I'm just wanting somebody to run because I think we need someone in that office. So anyway, Red Dockery encouraged me, and I kept going to people over the next several months. Buck Holdridge was another good friend of mine. He did the same thing. So make a long story short, several people that were influential in my life encouraged me to run. So I knew that we needed to replace the one there, so at the end of the day, I decided to run. And right at the last minute, 2 more people jumped in the race. One was my good friend Dan Howe, who I'd worked with in radio. He'd been in radio news for a few years. And also the football coach at Bradley High School that had won the state championship a couple years before.
So they offered.
Right. So the 3 of us take on each other in the primary. And I never will forget, I went to Dan Howe one day and I said, Dan, we're going to kill each other. I said, you're going to get the Church of God vote, Church of God of Prophecy vote, and we're going to split it, and the coach is going to win this thing. He said, well, you might be right, but I'm not pulling out. So he stayed in, and I lost that election by 100 votes. The same people I went back to again after the election. He went on to get beat in the general election. So I went back to people like Buck Holdridge and Red Dockery and Bill Ledford and others. And they all encouraged me, sit it out for 4 years and run again. So 4 years went by, and I told him then after he got beat, I said, I'll be back in 4 years to run for this seat.
What'd you do for the 4 years?
I continued to work in radio sales at that time. Served on the hospital board and things like that. But basically, I continued my job in radio for 4 years, but I also campaigned for 4 years. You lose a race by 100 votes, you don't sleep good in there.
Boy.
So anyway, I campaigned for the next 4 years, and then when it comes time for the election, the lady that I felt like needed to go decided not to run.
Donna Hubbard.
She decided not to run, and she threw her support to her assistant, and he ran against me in the Republican primary. So
Which was who?
And who was he?
Carl Shrewsbury.
Carl Shrewsbury.
So Carl Shrewsbury, who had been her assistant for several years, and he was a very good assistant, did a good job.
Clerk and master.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was my opponent, and make a long story short, I was successful that time and won the election. A quick one on Carl Shrewsbury, he was her assistant. He was my opponent in the primary. And then after I won the election, he was still the assistant, so he became my assistant for the next 2 years. stayed with me for a couple of years, and then
Now that
left.
speaks volumes of you to keep him.
Well, I told
Because
him
he
after
was
the
a
election,
good guy.
He was a good guy.
He was a
Still
good
is.
guy.
Was and is. He's still
Yeah.
around. Carl's a good guy. I mean, I had to run against him in the primary with her support, which was kind of odd. But anyway, he stayed with me for a couple of years. Then Dan Gilley pulled him away to make him his first budget director at the Sheriff's Department. And he worked there for a year or two and then went on to become clerk and master. And I told him one day, I said, way back there, I think you won the election. Because he had clerk and master. It's a 6-year appointment. You don't have to run for it. So he retired from clerk and master. And I saw him the other day in the post office. He seems to still be doing well. So that's sort of what got me into it 24 years ago. I've loved every minute of it. I think I've worked very hard at it. Talk about opponents. I've had many opponents through the years. I always jokingly tell people that I make the job look so easy that everybody wants to do it. It's not an easy job, I promise you, but it is a job where you're always upsetting somebody. You know, if you make a decision, you make 5 people happy, you hope that you only made 4 unhappy, so to speak. But it's been a great job over these years, and I've really enjoyed it. I'm sorry it took so long. But
No, that's what we want. We want to know about it. Well, okay. It's your time, Mayor.
Well, the gentleman sitting across the table, the Honorable Tom Rowland, Mayor Emeritus.
What does emeritus mean?
Has
It
been.
means a has been
No,
over the hill.
it means you're mayor forever, is what Mayor Emeritus means. The year was 2004, and there was an opening for city council. The gentleman who was at city council at that time, Tim Gobble, stepped down, resigned to become the director of the EMA, Bradley County EMA, prior to his run for sheriff. And so there was an opening for the city council. It was a mayor and council appointment, and they accepted applications, and everybody encouraged me, Tom encouraged me, to fill out an application. It wasn't an election, it was an appointment to fulfill the balance of his term. And it got down to 3 people. Richard Banks, who is now Judge Banks, Kevin Brooks, and a young lady who lived in the city. She had long hair. I want to say Donna Howard, but I can't think if that's
Keep
exactly.
thinking about Donna, don't you?
But it was 3 of us, and I lost. So my entry into politics was a failure. And everybody thinks that Kevin Brooks has won everything he's ever tried.
Was that a blessing to you, or did it
At
help
the
you?
time, Mayor Davis said it right. When you lose by 100 votes, you lose sleep at night. When everyone tells you you'll be great and this is what you need to do, and it doesn't happen, it's a huge loss. Mentally, emotionally, you're embarrassed. And Mayor Rowland asked me to come see him privately, and he said, "I believe in you. You've got a great future. If you'll let me help you," and shortly thereafter, an opening on the Planning Commission. So it was like a consolation prize. You can't be on the city council, so we're going to put you on the Planning Commission. And Dee, I promise you, the Bible says that God orders your steps. If I had not had that 2 years as a planning commissioner with Tim Henderson as my chair, I would not have been successful in the House of Representatives. It taught me everything about being a legislator. I didn't know who Robert was, and I didn't know his rules of order. I learned everything.
Didn't matter on the planning commission.
If Tom likes you, we love you.
Well,
That's the way I always felt.
it was the greatest blessing. So what I felt like was a loss, a consolation prize, was the greatest blessing because it gave me 2 years of planning commission training, experience. I had worked campaigns, I had handed out bumper stickers and put signs in the yards, but until you serve in some capacity, then in 2006, another opening became available. I had had 2 years of being in the paper and, like Gary, being on the radio and raising your profile within the community. That opportunity, the late Jim Sharp was very instrumental in he and at that time Mike Sharp, now Judge Sharp, and Dwayne Bunch. That opening in the House when Dwayne decided to run for Senate, I think Gary said it, he made it look so easy, everybody wanted to run. When the Church of God guy, there was only 2 people that had filed a petition to run in 06 for House. And when the Church of God guy filed, 3 more jumped in the race. So it turned out to be a 5-way primary. And it was a hard-fought summer. I lost 18 pounds going door to door in that hot summer heat. We knocked on thousands of doors and shook the hands of thousands of people to ask them to believe in us, that we wanted to take something different to Nashville. And I still say it was just a miracle. We won that 5-way primary with 40% of the vote, and went on to not have an opponent in the general. And like Mayor Rowland, about every other time for the 6 terms that I was there, you would have an opponent, then you wouldn't, and then people would run against you, and then it would be non-contested the next time.
Constant
so it was
running.
constant. Yeah.
Constant.
Before you go on to the next one, you made me think of something that I want to mention. Probably the 2 best things that ever happened to me. One was getting fired from my job. That was the most devastating day of my life that day, but it made a different person out of me, I think, in hindsight. And losing that first election, having that loss behind you, you looked at the election a lot differently. And once I was elected, I definitely looked at doing the job in the next election very differently. So having lost that first election and having been fired at some point in my life, I think has really helped me down the road. It makes you look at things a lot differently than if you've never been there and never gotten beat.
For instance, give us an example.
On the getting fired thing, I mean, when you go home and you sit down and your wife says...
But I mean, as far as you lost the election, what exactly would that make anything different? Are you like...
Well,
are you always thinking that's one of the 100?
He talks about door knocking and handshaking, and it's very hard work campaigning. I promise you. People that's gotten into it for the first time will tell you, I never realized how hard it was. I knew how hard it was. I'd worked the first time and lost, but over the next 4 years, I thought of all the things I could have done differently, or could have done more, or could have went on down the street and got 10 more houses, that kind of thing. So the second go around, I didn't leave any stones unturned, you might say, and had worked on them for 4 years. So I just went at it at a much harder attitude. My attitude that second go around is nobody's going to work harder than me, and I don't think anybody's going to beat me this time because I'm going to work my butt off. And that's what I did, and it was another tough election, but you appreciate it, and it makes you humble, keeps you humble, whatever the right term is. And I think it has helped me well over the years, because one thing I've never been accused of is being one of these uppity guys. I'm always humble. And the thing about having opponents, I don't want an opponent, but it keeps you humble because it puts you on the street door knocking, talking to the people, listening to what the citizens have to say. And I was telling a guy one time, that I think electing positions is better than appointing them. And he said, no, if I had to be elected, I wouldn't run. And but that's the problem. You should be out there door knocking, listening to the people. It forces you to do that. So even having opponents is a good thing, even though we don't enjoy it at the time. But it makes us be better servants, I think, for the citizens of our community. Didn't mean to jump in there. But,
no, it's good. All good points.
Okay, back to Mr. Brooks. Finish your...
And I can't go without saying it was Mayor Emeritus again. So think about my history. The first time putting me on the Planning Commission, always being encouraging, and then we come to the year 2016, 2017, Mayor Rowland had said, Kevin, I'd like for you to consider running for mayor. And what no one knows, Tom, I don't think anybody, except for our wives, is that I said no the first time. And then I said, Mayor, I've just figured out how to get this done in Nashville, and we've got Exit 20, and the Veterans Home had just been approved, and $23 million for Cleveland State, and I was vice chairman of finance, and it's funny how the Lord works. I had a very miserable 2 years in Nashville, and I remember coming home, and Kim and I had sold the house, and we were in a little condo. And I walked down and saw my friend, the mayor, and I said, would you let me reconsider? And I think, Mr. Cartwright, you were the first person I talked to. I think it was the very first cup of coffee at Lassiter's Coffee Shop in that same plaza. It was, what do you think? And so we began the plans for the 2018 run for mayor. And so Tom has allowed me to serve, and it has come full circle. Long before moving to Cleveland, when I did in the 80s to go to Lee, I talked to her just a few weeks ago, my 12th grade government teacher. Her name is Ginger Malloy, and she lives up in McMinn County. And it was her 12th grade government class that we took our senior trip. You remember your senior trip where you went
in high school?
In high school?
Yeah.
So my senior trip to high school was Washington, D.C. And of course, this was in Marietta, Georgia, before I came to Tennessee. And I was 16 or 17 years old. And we went to Washington. And at that time, Georgia Senator, U.S. Senator Sam Nunn, this was the Reagan era, he was the most powerful man in the world because he was in charge of the appropriations budget and the war budget. And remember Star Wars and tear down that wall. And so we were fighting against the Cold War and fighting against the Russians. And Senator Sam Nunn, this was a very small Christian school where I met my bride, Kim. And the graduating class of 13, we were all there. And he just motioned over to me and said, "Young man, come sit in my chair." And he said, "What's your name?" And I said, "Kevin." He said, "No, what's your last name?" And I said, "Brooks." And he said, "Senator Brooks, you could do this. That could be your chair." And Dee, it stuck in my spirit from that day to this. And the entire time I served in Nashville, and still to this day serving as mayor, after Mayor Rowland retired, I still ask for the young people to come sit in my chair. And I still encourage them and say, "That's not my chair, that's your chair. And one day you could sit there," because what I hope and what I pray is that, like Tom passing down the torch to me, that I will at some point be able to do that to the next generation of leadership.
The hardest thing we had to go through was the endorsement of you.
Which everybody else did. How
How
many endorsements did we hear in this campaign?
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem.
Eddie, tell us your story because
Mine's longer than these guys.
Because you came from a little different era. Am I right?
I did.
Who took office first, you or Tom?
I did.
So you came.
Tom was covering our meetings. I can well remember meeting at the Holiday Inn for our planning sessions, and Tom was there covering it for CLE.
So give us the raw, because you're talking about a wide range of elections here.
Well, to say a word about Kevin's, I remember meeting with Kevin at Lassiter's for a cup of coffee, and I can remember saying to him, and I don't know why I said it, if you'll come home and run, there's a lot of people who'll help you. And, of course, he did, and they did. But anyway, mine goes back to when I was a little boy. My mother we had haulers. On election day, people haul legal voters to the poll and for them to vote. And that was just to make sure that they got out to vote.
What'd you pay them?
She got, I remember.
It was liquid, wasn't it?
I can remember her working for my uncle, Milford Miller, who served about 40 years on the county commission. She was hauling for him, and I remember he gave her $20 for the day, and
so it was
she
up
had
and
to
above
pay,
board.
and she had to buy her gas out of that for the car. And I was young enough and small enough that I could stand up in the front seat. Now that's where mine started, and I had a little interest in politics really from that day on, and I remember the first real venture into politics, almost broke my marriage up. And it was a tough time. Miltine had always said, do whatever you want to do, but I don't want you in politics.
Well,
Wow.
Owen Swofford, who was chairman of the Republican Party, and his brother, J.T. Swofford, came out to the chalet, and Owen had a new pickup truck. I'll never forget it. They got me in the front seat of that pickup truck, in between them, so I couldn't get out. JT was spitting tobacco out one side, and Owen was fussing at him because he was messing up his new truck, wanting me to run for city commissioner. Now, I had been appointed at age 29 as director of public works for the city of Cleveland. And the way that all came about, I had gone to church with several politicians at Wesley. Tom Rowland was one of them. John Hall had been the state rep, and he came to me one day at church, and he said, I'm thinking about running for city commissioner. Would you help me? And so I talked to Miltine, and we decided we'd try to do what we could, and we did. And she, I remember, composed a little song, and at one of his rallies, she played a ukulele and sang that song. Vote for John Hall, you know, that kind of deal. Anyway, I got appointed, he got elected, and I got appointed Director of Public Works, 1966. And I went to work, and then in 1974, I ran for Commissioner of Public Works. That was under the old form of government that Cleveland had, where they had a mayor and commission form of government, and was elected. And I served 8 years as Commissioner of Public Works. Carl Collins was not going to run because the county government had been changed, and the term had been an 8-year term for a county judge to a 4-year term for a county mayor or county executive. And I decided that I'd leave the chalet where I had been employed for about 20 years, and I would run. And I was elected, and much to my sorrow, it wasn't 2 weeks into that term, I realized that we had $1.5 million deficit. Now, folks, that's tough.
What do you mean by deficit?
Well, we didn't have enough money to pay our bills. I remember going over to Diamond Lil's and having coffee, and the manager of Cooper's bookstore coming over to my table and saying, county owes me $640. I remember the amount. Could you pay me? I need my money.
So it wasn't there?
Wasn't there. I went back over to the office and I told Billy Lawson, who was my bookkeeper, what had happened. She said, you hadn't looked in the bottom drawer of your desk yet, have you? And I said, no. And I pulled that drawer out, and it was full of unpaid bills. Evidently, when they came in, the fellow that was there before me had just put them in that drawer and closed the drawer. Didn't have the money to pay it. I'm not knocking him. He didn't have the money to pay it. And the present county commission would not raise taxes enough to make us have a balanced budget. The hardest decision I made in politics was the state had sent me a letter and told me that we either set a tax rate where we could be solvent, not owe, or they'd come in and set it for us. Well, I did a little history on that, and everywhere that had happened, and it hadn't happened much, they had set a tax rate and they made sure it was set high enough to cover it. And I knew Bradley County was going to have a high tax rate if they came in and set it.
They'd set it higher than...
Yeah, they'd make sure that you had enough.
For a while.
You're right. And so, the fight began between the city commissioners about whether we would set a new tax rate or not. And it came down, I served 4 terms as chairman of the Bradley County Commission. And it came down to, if there was ever a tie, I had the privilege, if you want to call it that, of breaking the tie. Well, needless to say, it came down to 8 and 8 to set a new tax rate. And there I sit, having to make a decision to raise taxes.
With the knowledge that you knew.
That's right. And so I voted to raise taxes. And I'm sure that cost me.
How long had you been in office then?
I was in about the 3rd year of my first term. And I figured then that that was going to do it for me, that I'd never be elected again, and I wasn't.
To this day, can you say you had to do it?
Oh, yeah, I sleep well at night. I don't have any problem
It
with
had
that.
to be done.
Yeah, and so we set it, I broke the tie. Hal Dixon was the smartest guy I ever knew in politics. He was way ahead of anybody I ever knew. He was thinking about things down the road that you hadn't even begun to think about. And he had figured out a budget. He had figured out what it takes to fund that budget. And it was a bare bones budget. There wasn't any fat in there. And so I voted to break the tie, to raise the tax rate to the amount that Hal told me we needed to have. And we set Bradley County on a sound financial footing. And the next time taxes were raised, I think, is the group that's in there now raised it. So that's how long it worked. It worked. And, you know, and my good friend Mayor Davis, you know, presents a balanced budget, and he would not have been able to do that under the circumstances we had. Bill Walker was superintendent of schools, and he sent word to me that, and I'm recalling this from memory, that maybe he was $800,000 in the red. Didn't have the money to do. And see, we were getting close to not being able to meet the payroll for the teachers. And that's when the state comes in. Once you miss that payroll, state will come and take care of it. Anyway, I have to give credit then to the 3 gentlemen that are here at the table. I was out of politics. The same gentleman that fired Gary Davis was on my case big time. And
How come?
he was on the school board, and I was on the city commission. And he'd served, and here again, I'm recalling this from memory. Maybe,
He was on city commission?
what?
He was on
no,
city
I
board.
was.
Oh, he was on school board.
He was on school board, and he was chairman. And the teachers were all calling and wanting to him to be replaced. And he had been there like 3 terms. And in those days, the city commission appointed the city school board members. And I was a swing vote on whether he was reappointed or not.
Well, you got it again, didn't you?
I did. I got it again. And I'll never forget it. My good friend Kenneth Tinsley looked at me and said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "If I do what the folks I'm talking to want done, I'm not going to vote for him." And he said, "I'm not either." And so we did not reappoint him. And from then on, I was on his, well, I won't call it the kind of list I would normally, but I was on his list, his outhouse list.
Crap.
Yeah, okay,
crap.
that's cleaning it up. Anyway, so that was just, from then on, I'll never forget it. And you can look this up. There's a banner somewhere at the library. It said headlines. Now, not just a little story somewhere. Headlines said, "Cartwright breaks tie to raise taxes." That was the headlines of the Banner the next day after we met.
Because he was in charge of the Banner.
That's right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. And he used it.
Completely in charge.
What?
Completely in charge.
Oh, yeah.
Iron fist.
Yeah. And so anyway, but back to, along came Gary Davis, and Buck Holdridge had died, and he asked me to be his finance campaign manager, whatever you want, title. No title, no work really.
Big pay though.
What?
It's good pay though.
Yeah, yeah, real good pay, like zero. But anyway, Gary did a good job of managing his money, raising money to run on, and I signed off on his financial reports. So he kept me, and then he appointed me on the planning commission, county planning commission, and I served, I don't know how long, a term or two, and that kept me a little bit involved. And then one day I got the wild hair that I might like to serve on the Cleveland Utility Board. So I called my good friend Tom Rowland, and I said, Tom, what do you think about me? He said, oh, I'll nominate you. I never forgot that. And I said, well, I think I can get the votes if you nominate me. And of course I did, and I still serve on the Cleveland Utility Board. And that's kept me involved. My term was up, and my good friend Kelvin Brooks renominated me, and so therefore I got to keep my job. So that's kind of my story. I have enjoyed it, and I've made a comment at the well-known liars table not long ago. Everybody was talking politics, and the election had been, and Gary had won big time, and this one had lost, and and I sat there and thought about that, and I just wished that I was younger. And the reason I wished I was younger, I'd still be running. Now, when I got
what would you run for?
I don't know.
Yeah, what would you run for?
I don't know.
Well, think about it a minute.
Well, I'd run for one of two.
Good question.
One of two jobs, Dee. I would run for county commission or city council. One of those two.
At large.
Yeah.
What about this? Go ahead.
But I thought, see, I ran and got beat. I ran 6 times. And I won 5, and I got beat the last time I ran. And I got beat, and here again, I'm recalling this from memory, maybe out of 16,000, I got beat about 200 votes or some number. And like Gary said, you get beat that small, it works on your mind about, well, if I would have done this or I would have done that, could I have won? Mm-hmm. I knew when I ran the last time that my rope was short, and I figured that I could win one more time in a close election and then never be elected again. That's the way I had it figured, and I miscalculated a little bit there. But anyway, Donna Hubbard beat me, and it was a bad day because I knew she knew absolutely zero about politics and running the county government as far as the county executive got to run. I knew that was a bad deal, and it turned out to be a bad deal. Now, she got reelected a time or two, but I could sit back and look at the bad decisions, the way she was going with our county, and it sure was a good day when Gary got elected. I tell you, that was I made a comment in one of his campaign ads or something that I felt like he had been the best county executive or county mayor that we'd ever had, and that I was in a position to make that comment because I had been one, my opponent had been one, and Gary had, and I knew that he was far and away a lot better than the 2 previous ones.
Well, Gary was about the best that money could buy.
Yeah, that's what we used to tell Harry Death Row. Best that money could buy.
I thought that was Ed Lewis. We used to say that about
Yeah,
Ed, but
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Road Superintendent Ed Lewis?
Yeah.
I think it just goes.
E double D.
He did a good job, didn't he? Ed was a good
Road man.
He was a good road man.
They
Yeah.
still call him Roadman.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's his nickname.
Old Fort, they still say Roadman.
You know, sitting here, y'all, every one of y'all, and I've been involved in politics, not involved, but watching from a sideline since, I don't know, back in the day when,
Planning Commission.
well, no, even Randall Fisher. Remember when nobody could beat Randall Fisher?
I
Remember that? And that was the era that I came up in. I remember when Dee Frisbee threatened to whip Goldie's ass at the liar's table.
I was
Remember
there
that?
that morning. Yeah,
And
sure.
And Dee
Wow.
Frisbee would have.
He would have tried at least.
He would have tried.
Yeah, he told him, stand up and I'll whip your butt.
That's what
And
he told him.
At the
And
table.
Goldie didn't stand up.
No, and he went one step farther. He said, well, you won't stand up. If you go outside, I'll whip you.
That's right.
And he didn't go
and Dee
outside.
Frisbee would have.
Yeah,
Or he would have tried.
yeah.
He was the only guy that could stand up to Goldie that I remember.
And and Goldie was really his boss. Goldie was chairman of the school board and Dee was a principal.
And he had had cancer like 4 times. Remember that?
I do.
Wow.
And a great guy,
Yes.
wasn't he?
Yes.
I mean, if he didn't like you, you had a problem. You were a problem.
Yeah.
We've been talking about who got us involved early on. First of all, I'll throw in a question. Who was the one that, I won't say defeated, but replaced Randall Fisher?
My dad, I think, wasn't he?
No, he served with Randall.
With Randall. Yeah, that's right. Who served?
Jerry
Anyway,
Estes?
you can figure that one out.
Was it Jerry Estes?
Who was it?
Sir?
Jerry Estes?
No.
It was Bobby Burris and Randall Fisher, and then I ran, Randall Fisher and Jackie Calloway ran, and Jackie Calloway and I won. So Randall Fisher went out when I went in.
Gotcha.
That's correct.
You know,
That came later, right? That was back when the county commissioner ran. You didn't run for each seat.
No,
you ran
no.
for.
The two
yeah,
most-
if the
two
three
difference.
ran, the two highest votes
That's right.
served. They
When
didn't-
did we change this form of
That new
government?
A and B that they talk about now.
Jeff Yarber pushed that probably 8 years ago. It was Jeff Yarber kept pushing that we ought to do that, and then Bill Ledford fought it, and then Bill Ledford retired and went off the commission, and they got it passed once he went out. But I wanted to mention something. You're talking about who got us involved. I'll tell you an ironic twist of things. The very first person that talked to me into running, encouraged me to run, was Red Dockery. 8 years later, his grandson is my opponent. It's kind of ironic. The second person to encourage me to run, who gave me my first $50 contribution, was Von Hamilton. And 12 years later, his granddaughter was my opponent. So be leery of who's your first people to encourage you to run, because their grandson or their granddaughter may run against you down the road.
Yeah.
So that was funny. Red Dockery isn't alive now, but his grandson was my opponent twice so far. And
so far.
What's his name?
Johnny Mull.
And,
Is that right? I didn't realize
and
that.
Von Hamilton,
I like
who's
Von.
a good friend of mine. He gave me, I never will forget, one day at Diamond Mills, he handed me a $50 bill and he said, "Here, go buy you some signs." First contribution I had. That was in '98, and in 2010, his granddaughter, Lisa, was my opponent. But he wasn't around.
I didn't realize that was his granddaughter.
Oh, yeah. So that's kind of an ironic twist of things over the years.
You know, and Mr. Cartwright talked about, he said, if you'll come home, Kevin, and run, people will help you. And no one helped me more than Eddie Cartwright. It was absolutely astonishing to me.
Now, when you say help, you're serious.
I'm not kidding. And he won't take credit for it. Mayor,
No, I bet he will. Don't
Mayor
you, Tom?
Rowland.
Thanks, Dee. Thanks.
Mayor Rowland.
I'll come back to your program again.
Came up and was very generous with his endorsement, and it turned on us. The banner, you
Yeah.
heard some headlines
Yeah.
that Eddie Cartwright breaks the tie to raise taxes. Well, the banner opted to think differently about the endorsement, that it wasn't fair, although in the current campaign, no one had a bad word to say about the dozens of endorsements that were offered for the dozens of candidates in a dozen different races. Not one editorial was against endorsements, but in that race at that season, it was deemed inappropriate, and it caused County Executive Cartwright to have to work twice as hard. And I would say he outworked guys my age all day long. And his network from the county to the city and everywhere in between never ceased to amaze me.
Well, you hit me at a time when I was not having anything to do.
Well, thank God.
And
While he's fixing that, I'll jump in. I ain't got him fired up.
Thank you.
Because he had been out of it for a while, and we got him involved in the
yours,
a few
right?
elections
Yeah.
back, and he really, he won't say this, but he became alive again as far as in politics, not as a candidate, but working in others. So he'd gotten really involved, and then when your election came along, he was fired up and ready to go. And yeah, I sat back and watched all the things he was doing.
Thanks for ginning that up.
But we had gotten you fired up, hadn't we?
you had. I had not been involved, and
Do I owe Miltine an apology if she?
no. She'd already got over. Let me finish that little story. That I remember, I was at the chalet, and she loved hot ham and cheese sandwich that we made in the restaurant. I had decided to run. I had told Owen Swofford and J.T. Swofford and some others that I would run. Hadn't talked to her. She didn't have a clue. As a mistake.
How old were you, Eddie?
29, he said.
29 was when I was first appointed, so I was there about 4 years. So I was probably 32 or 3, somewhere in there. Anyway, Dee had worked at the chalet. You remember the honeymoon suites?
Yes.
Okay, it had a little table and chairs and a kitchen and all. So I told my folks that worked for me there, I said, go down there and set that up, and I want to take my wife down there, and I want you to bring her a hot ham and cheese sandwich, and I don't remember what I had, I've got to have a little meeting with her. So I called her, and she immediately said, what's going on? And I said, come on and have lunch with me. So she came, and I told her what was going on. She never ate her sandwich. She went back home, and when I got home that night, she gone. No note, nothing. Her car was gone. So I thought, well, she'll be back in a little while. And she didn't come back. So I slept.
This is an untold story.
That's right. That's right.
I hope she's.
I've never heard this story.
And she was gone. So that was on like I don't remember, maybe a Friday night. And she was gone. Didn't come back. Saturday morning I got up and I thought, man, what's going on? And didn't hear anything all day Saturday. Still gone. Saturday night, no Miltine. Sunday morning, phone rang. And you all don't know Fred Gill, but he was a friend of mine, and we had owned a cabin together over on the river, and he had his job had transferred him to Birmingham. And his old Fred, he said, I'm in a phone booth downtown. He said, I don't know if you know what's going on or what, but Miltine's down here. And I said, well, I'll call. So we hung up, and I called Fred's house. Got Joanne, his wife, and I said, put Miltine on the phone. Miltine who? She, what? I said, no, I know she's there. Let me talk to her. And so I talked to her, and I said, I'll come get you, or you come on home, or whatever you need to do. And she did, and she got over it, and I ran for office. And
The rest
Well,
is
how did you phrase that? Was it precious Miltine?
I said whatever I needed to say. I don't remember, but I'm sure it was more than that. Because I sure was devastated. We never had any problems. We've been married 66 years, and we've had very few even arguments, let alone problems. But that's a problem. That was a problem. But now she finally got in the harness and was ready to help me run and all that sort of thing. But to get over that initial hump was tough. Tough.
She's a great lady.
She is that, and I'll have to agree with you.
Let me tell you about Capstar Bank. They're located in Nashville, Hendersonville, Gallatin, Athens, Madisonville, Sweetwater, Etowah, and in Cleveland at 950 25th Street and 3855 North Ocoee Street. I've used them. I like them. Give them a try. They're no problem. Hello, I'm Dee Burris, and most of you know me as a general contractor. In October of 2020, I started a podcast that I call The Discussion with Dee Burris. Each week, I have conversations with interesting, informative, and fascinating people from Cleveland and Bradley County and the surrounding areas. You can watch the discussion at dburris.com on YouTube and Facebook, where we would ask you to please subscribe, it's free, for updates and notifications of new shows. It's no problem.
Mr. Cartwright was talking about his wife, Miltine.
Call him Eddie.
Well, I still call him Mr. Cartwright. I still do.
We're friends,
I'm
right?
old school. But I look around this table, and I think Sandra and Miss Davis, Sonia, and Miltine, and Kim, and how instrumental each one of our wives have been and still are to this day in what it is that their husbands have chosen to do. Because the wife is just as much involved
And criticized without a voice.
Correct. You don't get elected to be first lady. That just comes with it. It's an expectation. And how each one of the ladies around this table, not only as our wife and our helpmate in life, does an incredible job. I've seen Sandra and how she and Tom are such partners. Same with the Davises and the Cartwrights and Kim.
And the Brooks.
And I was going to say, Mrs. Brooks, who gets up and
How he ever got Kim is really, it's been a real mystery.
That's kind of
She
like,
was so young,
that's
she
kind
didn't
of
know
the
what
two,
she was-
the two phenomena is Steve Hartline and Kevin Brooks.
That's
how
true.
they got their
Well,
wives.
I look at Kim, and she's such a pretty lady.
classy.
And she's
She looks
always
like a 20-year-old cheerleader.
Well, she's always dressed just so and
Good posture.
Yeah.
Posture is important.
Well, it is, and they don't get paid for it. Somebody said earlier about all the money they get
Posture's
paid.
Posture, yeah, that's important.
They don't get paid for it. It's voluntary. It's expected. They're expected to show up, expected to be at places, expected to do things.
Get ready. And what about the meetings when you say, "Oh, I forgot to tell you,
Oh,
tomorrow night
all
we've
the
got to
time.
go to
Tomorrow
so and so
night.
or
I'll say
whatever
it
it
the day.
is."
Oh, honey, it's 5 o'clock, and we're
That
supposed to be
happens a lot.
At
we're supposed to be at
so-and-so.
the museum at 6.
Do they ever get mad? Because I could see that happening. Like I'm not going or something like that. Of course, they end up going, but you have to go through that.
I would say that they're disappointed that we don't do a better job letting them know.
I don't know.
I'll go one step farther than that. I've kidded Tom Rowland for years. Sandra is a gifted lady as far as being able to do a write-up, having worked at the Banner and
You don't need credit.
and no, I'm telling you what, I can read where Rowland said
We all
something,
can.
and I know who wrote it, and it'll be Sandra.
Sandra's
they
a
were
PR
in my
machine.
Sunday school class, so I got to know kind of the way she thought and talked and all. And I could read those articles and tell it was Sandra's doing, which was good for Tom. Good for Tom.
And since I've had this surgery, the 5 surgeries I had in a month's time, thanks to Dr. Winger. And
Dr. Winger, yeah.
He did that. She's been the helpmate I would never imagine.
Oh,
I could
yeah.
have.
Oh, yeah.
But all 4 of y'all have a different thing. I'm looking from the outside in. Y'all have a different thing, a charisma that other people don't have. You're articulate. You can all talk. Your speech flows. It's a gift, and I'm sure y'all don't realize you've got it. And I don't know where you got that. I assume you were born with it.
Well, and Cartwright always promises tomatoes, but they never come.
Sorry, Eddie.
I don't think you're born with it. I know I wasn't.
Well,
When I was in high school, I was the most timid, bashful young guy you'll ever know.
what school did you go to learn it?
Lily Frank Fitzgerald.
Wow.
She was she had
Arch's mother?
that's Archie's wife.
Why?
Arch's mom.
Rodney's.
Rodney's mother.
Glenn Ramsey's what?
They're kinfolks, but I don't know. But I tell you what happened to her. She was teaching, and Arch was her student, a senior, and she was single, and they married. Now, this day and time, they probably frown on that, but this was a long.
No, go over that again.
Lily Frank Fitzgerald was Lily Frank Hahn, Haun.
J.C. Hahn?
She
No.
was kinfolks. Probably, I think so. Anyway, she was teaching at Bradley, and Arch Fitzgerald, who went on to be at the Bank and Trust a lot of years. Anyway, he was a pretty good athlete in her class as a senior, and they got married.
Is that right?
Yeah,
How
they
much
got-
older was she than him?
10 years, I understand,
Good
but I'm not
gosh.
sure of that. Anyway, she had Rodney, only child she had, as far as I know, and she quit teaching until Rodney got up to, I guess, first grade age, and then she came back to Bradley. Well, there was not an opening in English, but there was an opening in speech class, and I had speech under her, and she did wonders for me. She took me aside just almost like I was the only student she had, and she said, you know, you can do this. You just got to decide you can do this. And she taught, I'll never forget this, she taught me, she said, the first thing you ought to really say if you're making a speech to a group, you need to have something that gets their attention, because she said, it doesn't matter what you say if you don't have their attention. But if you'll say something, and I remember my speech. I was playing basketball at Bradley, and I remember I had read an article somewhere where a guy had put on his warm-up and had forgot to put his basketball trunks on. He must have been nervous. Anyway, coach sent him in, and when he jerked his warm-up off, he didn't have his pants, his basketball. And my
What,
first,
like his underwear?
a jock strap, I guess.
Oh.
Anyway, my first sentence was, "Have you ever lost your britches?" And that got their attention, and I never forgot that. And even when I went to college, I had a speech teacher, and it was not a very good teacher, but I told him about that, and he said, you had a good speech teacher. But she went on to be a more than excellent English teacher. She was really good. As a matter of fact, I was city commissioner in charge of public works, and she called one day and she said, my street needs to be paved. It's never been paved since the original street was laid out. And it did need to be paved. I had her, Miltine had her, my son Tim had her, And Jill was going to have her the next year, but she was retiring. I said, I'll make a deal with you, Miss Fitzgerald. I couldn't call her Lily Frank. I said, I'll make a deal with you. I'll pave your street if you'll stay one more year and let my daughter have you for English. And she laughed and she said, I'd love to do that, but I've already filed all my paperwork and it's too far gone now. And so I still paved her street. And I know I saw her some years later in a food store, grocery store. She was an aisle over, and I knew she was an aisle. I knew she could hear what I was saying. And I wasn't talking to anybody, but I said, have you lost your pants lately? I said, I was playing basketball. And she, before I could go any farther, she said, Eddie Cartwright, I'm hearing every word you're saying. And she came around the corner, and she was a great lady. And
she didn't mind correcting you either on the radio.
No, she was a really good teacher. Really. Did you have her?
No, I started to say I had her at Bradley too for senior English. And a quick one on when I first got elected. I got elected, sworn in this particular morning. And at noon that day, I was speaking to some group. I don't remember who at the time. But anyway, I get up to speak. It's your first day. I'm nervous. And I look over the crowd, and there's Miss Fitzgerald sitting in the audience. And I'm like, oh, my gosh. So I proceeded with my speech, nervous as I was. And when it's over, I thought, I am going to get it now. I finished my speech. The thing was over. Everybody's shaking hands and all this stuff. And on the way out, there's Miss Fitzgerald at the door. She said, Gary, she put her hands on my shoulder. She said, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do. She proceeded to critique the speech, which I knew she would. But yeah, that's Miss Fitzgerald. She was a perfectionist, and she was always working to make you better.
Right.
But that very first day, she got me started out.
Did y'all have the Dale Carnegie course? Did you?
I did. And
you did? Did you?
No.
My grandmother was a member of Toastmasters.
Mm-hmm.
Was you a member of Toastmasters?
No.
And she would.
I had the Dale Carnegie.
She would
You learned a
correct.
lot.
Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah.
She would correct
Everybody
my
ought
speeches.
to take that class.
She would critique me, correct me as I was growing up, and she would say, "Well, at Toastmasters they taught us," and she would begin to speak that into me at a very, very young age. And then my father introduced
Which
me to
did you
the
like better? Which benefited you more, the Dale Carnegie or the Toastmasters?
I think the Dale Carnegie, that process, invaluable. The whole concept too of just how to win friends and influence people and make sure that you. Someone used the word. I think it was Mayor Davis. Humble. It's stunning how many people in our selected profession, or as my wife calls, political hobby, think that they already know or already have figured it all out. And there's something golden. I learned this from Mayor Emeritus Rowland. Letting them speak, letting them tell the story, explain their problem. Street hasn't been paved since the streets were laid out. And then giving empathy, I'm so sorry. And then not saying, that you've got it figured out or you're wasting my time, but truly have a humble, we call it servant leadership.
Is there a formula to public office?
Formula?
Is there a formula?
I don't believe there is. I believe every individual has makes his own footprint.
In a different season?
Probably.
You know what I'm saying?
I do.
A different season?
I do. I think everybody has to do his thing and hope it works. I think a lot of stuff's involved. You've got to show passion for your voters, your taxpayers. I think you need to try to do what's right. Now, sometimes that's not popular, and that's tough. But
is there actual work? You got the running, the politics, the popularity, that's one thing. But somewhere in there, is there an actual job
Description.
I mean, is it a real job?
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Once you're finished with the politics on
Yeah.
August 4th,
Yeah.
August 5th, you start with policy.
Is it harder than somebody like me would sit here and say, man, I didn't realize Gary had to do all that, or say, Tom, man, how'd you get all that done?
I still tell people that Tom smiled when he told me the job description as mayor and told me how much easier it would be than Nashville and less work and less stress, and it's none of that. It's
Is it
harder and longer and more work.
But you're at home.
Well, you are. You're home.
That's
you sleep.
important,
You
I
sleep in
think.
your bed every night. But when you're mayor of a city, he was for 27 years. You were mayor 24 hours a day. You're county mayor 24 hours a day, and it's breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It's Saturdays and Sundays. I got calls today, on Sunday,
God, man.
about things that I have to fix tomorrow.
A ditch or something,
100%.
who knows?
100%.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I was going fishing the day before yesterday,
I'm surprised about that.
and I got a phone call in the car, and it was Mayor Brooks. And the guy that was driving the car had already talked to me about a fella right over here on Savannah Avenue who was complaining about people driving too fast on his street. And I told Mayor Brooks, and he had an answer for it. And anyway, that's not what I want to tell. This fellow had not been for Mayor Brooks in the election. And after we hung up, he said, you know, one of the biggest mistakes I've made politically, and he's not a political person, he said, a fellow at the liar's table who's a county commissioner talked me into being for Kevin Brooks' opponent. And he said, that was a mistake. And he said, but I'll make up for it in the future. So, you know, you never know when you're doing something and you're not really trying to get a vote. You don't even know a vote's involved when how it can come around and help you. And you know, and I really think, and maybe it's just me, I was born and raised in Bradley County, and my family has been involved politically all my life. All my life. My dad was roadman. He was the Republican committeeman for the Mayfield precinct.
Wow.
He served on the city school board. My uncle Milford Miller served 44 years on the county commission. My half-brother Elmer was in charge of sanitation for the city of Cleveland. And my dad's cousin was superintendent of the schools in Bradley County. So we've been, and I don't mean this in any bragging kind of way, it's just that that's been an interest among our folks. And why it is, I don't know.
I believe it goes beyond being articulate and being popular. I think that the passion to serve and the love of Cleveland and or Bradley County, I think it comes out in a way that's beyond Art Fitzgerald's wife and beyond Dale Carnegie and beyond Mayor Rowland's magnetism. I think it just is, there's something that's there that I don't know what it is.
I don't either.
But it's there.
But I do think this.
Am I right?
You're absolutely right.
At some point, you need to know how to say no. I served on 11 committees, 11 different
Boards, yeah.
boards and so forth. But now I have learned I'm down to about 4 or 5 now, and I'm going to go lower than that. I'm not going to say.
I'm on 2.
Dee, there's
Well,
something about public service.
And
And
when
I'm
you
wore out with them.
well when you serve on one that you can see, Life Bridges is a good example.
Oh yeah.
When I can see that you're helping people that can't help themselves, and then they really can't. I mean, there's a certain gratification you get out of it.
Let me interject for a minute. Did Clifton Weaver die this week?
Clifton died. That's a good story. Let me tell
Tell
that
us
story.
that, because we mentioned him last week on the podcast. Was he still alive? And we didn't know, and he died this week. What
did.
are the odds of that?
Yeah.
What are the odds of that? But what was his dad's name? Jim?
Gene.
Gene. I kept calling him
I
Jim.
played golf with Gene about 20 years. Gene's father had a machine shop at 5 Point when I was young, and Gene worked there for his dad.
Remember Gene had the necklaces?
That's right. Long before they were popular.
That's right.
And Gene's wife died in an insane asylum,
Oh, I didn't know
Clifton's mama. Clifton has a sister. That's all that's left. She lives up in Kentucky. And Gene came to my house one day after we played golf. He said, I want to talk to you. And I said, okay, come on in.
That's not been too long ago. I remember that.
He said, I'm going to die one of these days, and Clifton's not going to have a place to live. Clifton's not going to have anybody to take care of him. He said, aren't you on the board at Life Bridges? And I said, yes. He said, sure would help us if I knew that when something happened to me, he'd be taken care of. So I set about trying to figure out how we would do that. As far in the future, who knew when Gene was going to die? When would you know? So I talked to Walter Hunt. Walter was in charge of Life Bridges at the time. And Walter said, well, he'll have to be tested at team evaluation because he doesn't have any money. Gene doesn't have any money. For him to be funded to our program, he got to meet the criteria. It so happened that my wife was a liaison officer for team evaluation. And if you know Miltine, like for instance, Tom, she's straight-laced. She'd never tell you a dirty joke. She'd never use a cuss word. She's just that way. That's her nature. So Clifton goes down to team evaluation to be tested. And you have to make under 70 on your IQ test to be eligible. He made 71. He wasn't eligible. I sat Miltine down one night. I said, now listen to me.
Yeah.
He's not going to have anywhere to live. This is not something that needs to happen this way.
Yeah, he made that by an accident, right?
And so I said, can we not have him retested? She said, well, it'd probably make the same grade. I said, do you not know the doctor that tests him? She grinned. She said, yeah. She told me his name, Dr. Rubin. I remember his name, from Atlanta. I said, he needs to make a 69. Now, here's the way I'd go about it if it was me, hoping she'd follow that. I said, first of all, when you take him from here to Chattanooga, I'd talk to him all the way down there about, now, Clifton, you don't have to do your best.
Yeah.
You know, and I said, but you also need to have the groundwork laid with the doctor that he needs to make a 69. He made a 71.
Again?
He made a 71. But when the report came in, it was 69. The doctor had listened to Miltine. She had talked to him and told him, and he changed the report.
If anybody needed help, it was Clifton.
That's right.
I didn't have to take a test to know that.
That's right. And so he and you wouldn't believe the pretty little room he lived in.
Where was it?
Out by Cleveland State in one of our homes.
You really took care of him, Eddie. And
he-
I remember Gene asking you to do that.
He had a little room, And I don't know how they let him have, most of them have 2 or 3 in a room. You know, that's just the way it is to take care of. He had a room by himself. It was a small room, maybe half as big as this room. And he had a twin bed. He had a little TV, had a little radio, and he could operate both of those. And he lived there till he died. And even when hospice came in his last days, they came into the home out there. And I'll tell you a funny story about it. He would end up at Cracker Barrel or the Old Fort.
Yeah.
And he would eat, and then he would sit around and wait for somebody to say, "You need a ride?"
Yeah.
And
Or
a lot
dessert.
of people
I drove
have,
him.
yeah, everybody.
I drove him home.
Okay, well,
15
one morning he came in the Old Fort and he sat at the liar's table.
I don't remember.
He came to the liar's table. Well, Corky gave him his food. He didn't
Sure.
charge him. And when they came around, Wanda was working there then, and she got his order. And I didn't hear what he ordered, but I was sitting at the other end of the table, and I watched what he got. He had a couple of eggs and sausage and biscuits and gravy. So I said, "Clifton," I said, "does Life Bridges not feed you any breakfast?" And he said, "Yeah." Said, "They just feed you that old cold stuff like cereal with milk." Said, "I wanted biscuits and gravy." And so he was down there to get something that he liked to eat. But his sister is coming down for a funeral service. And
For his funeral service?
yeah.
What did he die of?
You know, I don't know.
How old would he have been?
I guess he was in his 70s, maybe middle 70s.
Was he always like that?
Yes.
Wonder what was wrong with him.
He was born with a physical and mental disability. I was lifeguard at the city pool, and he lived on the same street I lived over next to North Cleveland Church of God, and he would come to the swimming pool every day.
Was you about the same age?
No, he was old and much younger than me. I'm 10
Did you
years.
know he had a problem
Oh
then?
yeah, oh yeah. Well, I saw him come in, and he hadn't been out there much, and we had kids his age jump off that diving board in the deep water all the time, swim like fish. I saw him get up on the diving board, and I thought, well, old Clifton probably can swim. Man, he went off that diving board, didn't dive, he jumped, and that got my attention. I was sitting up on the lifeguard chair. He didn't come up. So I bailed off, and the pool was probably 10 foot deep. I don't remember exactly. I remember going down, and he was sitting down there, just bubbles just going everywhere. His eyes were about that big. And when I touched him, which you're not supposed to do if you're going to save somebody, you're supposed to go behind them, and there's a proper way to do it. But I didn't. Man, he grabbed me around the neck, and I had my feet on the bottom of the pool, and I pushed off and came up right by the ladder, and he grabbed that ladder. And I said, "Clifton, do not come back down here in this deep water." And he never did. But he would come every day from then on, and he would stay in the...
Isn't it ironic? You, in theory, saved him then and saved him to the end.
Well, that was no big deal.
That's
really.
Eddie.
That, you know, he
That's Eddie
was...
Cartwright.
Isn't that ironic?
He needed help, and
What
he
did
got
Gene
it.
do for a living?
He worked for his dad, John,
5 points.
5 points in a little machine shop. And
When I knew him, he was already retired.
yeah, Gene,
Did you know him, Tom?
I knew him.
Gene liked to shoot pool, gamble on the ball games.
Liked women.
He dated the same lady 37 years.
Wow.
He sure did.
Couldn't settle down.
Didn't he have missing teeth right through here? Something like that.
Might have.
I think he had.
I tell you, when his lady friend died, they, of course, were not married, and they're 37 years they dated, and he moped around. And playing golf, he was just not the same guy. One morning, he was just a humming and a whistling, and I said, "Whoa!" I said, "What's going on here, Weaver?" He said, "Got a new girlfriend," and she was 89 years old, and he was probably 70. So I said, is she not a little old? He said, it doesn't matter. So
He was a good guy.
oh
wasn't he?
yeah, he's a good guy. Good guy.
Clifton would go to the funeral homes when they had refreshments.
And churches, every church
Yeah,
meeting
yeah, he'd
they
always-
had. Did he live? He lived over there next to Deer Park, right?
That's right. That's
and
right.
Didn't he have like a? Didn't he not have like a regular shower? What was the deal with that?
Well, that is an unusual thing. There was no bathtub or shower in the house. And I asked Gene one day, I said, what do you do? He said, I've got a hose in the basement. That little old house had a basement. And he said, I've got that hose rigged up on the floor joist with a sprinkler on the end of it. And there's a drain in the basement. And he said, got a faucet down there. And he said, we go down there and take a shower in that. I said, what do you do in the winter time? He said, take a cold shower.
I was going to say, I don't
Now
think that'd be hot and
this
cold.
has not been that long ago. What,
No, it
what
would've-
10 years ago, 15, 12?
15 years ago, probably.
Can you imagine? You'd have thought that
Wow.
house, because that house would bring what right now?
I don't know, but it's not there anymore. Somebody tore it down. It was
It's not there?
no, it's not there. They built a new little house there. It was pretty dilapidated. It was falling in, and Gene had not made many provisions financially. I'll tell you a story about his daddy. When I was going to Bradley, a big deal was basketball banquet, football banquet. And if you had a girl you were going to take, and I can remember taking Miltine, and everybody bought a corsage. And it would have a black and gold ribbon on a flower. Well, the flower, Gene's daddy had a little hothouse, grew orchids.
Now, where was his shop at first?
Right, his shop was at 5 Point where they worked,
Where
but
at?
he lived right behind where the museum is now, and it faced that street run parallel with the railroad. But he lived on Georgetown Road, along about 20th Street, in a brick house. The house is still there, and in the backyard he had a greenhouse. And he grew orchids as a hobby and sold them. And when you were taking your girlfriend just before you picked her up, you went by Mr. Weaver's, and for $3 you got an orchid. Times have changed.
Times have
Boy,
changed.
they have changed.
If you want residential or commercial plumbing, give Rick's Plumbing a call. Call Jason or Josh. They'll do you a good job. I use them. I've used them for years. They're no problem.
Come on, woo! One.
Let me ask you this, speaking of times changing, when did the city change its form of government? Where like in,
Talk to
What
Tom.
was the deal?
1992, actually.
Yeah.
was
started-
you already in office?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Why did you do that?
I didn't do it.
Well, who did it?
The
Lawsuit.
referendum of the people.
Why?
Don't ask me.
It began as a lawsuit,
Yeah.
representation lawsuit.
Chattanooga was.
Now tell us, what was it prior to that? Because I remember that being,
Prior to that, you had a mayor and 5 commissioners.
Commissioners, like Mr.
And
Cartwright.
each one was
4.
over one department.
4 instead of 5.
well, didn't that
The
work
mayor
pretty
had
well?
the mayor had a vote. That made 5.
Well, did that work good?
Yeah.
It
Not
wasn't
anymore.
a district, so they claimed that they didn't have equal representation.
They didn't subpoena me, but they called me and asked me to testify before them. And they were going, Sonny Hicks was on the commission.
Commission.
Yeah.
City commission?
Yeah. And I had served in the city and the county government both, and they wanted to hear the other side. And I was honest. I just told them what I thought.
Which is what?
I didn't think they ought to change it. And the reason I didn't think it, I had watched the county work, and the county, if you had a commissioner from Charleston, I don't care if you had somebody in Valley View had a problem and you voted to correct the problem at Valley View, the guy at Charleston wanted his pound of flesh too. And the city, everybody looked after the whole city. They didn't have a district. There was no districts. You were elected, you ran citywide. The mayor and all the commissioners ran citywide. Therefore, if there was a problem on South Church Street, it's just like a problem on North Ocoee Street.
You could be blamed or you could help.
That's right. That's right.
Well, Chattanooga had a lawsuit and they lost it for a new form of government because for these very reasons that.
And the integration was going big right there.
Yes,
I don't know why that would have anything to do with integration, but I guess it did.
Well, the blacks.
Do we like this form of government better or worse?
I don't have an opinion on it. I'm not involved.
What do you think, Tom?
I wish the mayor had a vote now.
Well,
I've got a veto, but I don't have a vote.
we had a good form of government back in the old days before it changed.
In your opinion, did it work better that way?
Well, the idea was to keep politics out of being given a job, which doesn't work either.
No.
In my opinion, it should be like it used to be.
Will it ever go back?
Well, it's up to the referendum of the people.
I remember, seems to me like it worked a lot better.
Well, you were responsible for. See, when I was elected city commissioner, I was in charge of streets, sanitation, garbage pickup. So if there's a problem in those areas, they had somebody to call.
Well, sure.
And didn't have a city manager. You were in charge of your departments and you made them run right.
Just like
or you
any
got
other
your
business.
rear beat in the next election.
Yeah.
And so that,
Back then, if I had a problem, I'd go to Tom and he'd try to figure it out or tell me to go get lost or something. But you had somebody to talk to.
We'd usually figure it out.
We figured it out.
Yeah.
He figured it out before it was a problem. Now it's just, I don't know. It's like nobody's problem.
Well, as long as city manager is there and has 4 votes, you can forget it because he's got 4 votes, so he's not going to get fired.
He's got to worry about 4 people.
That's right. And that's another whole story.
Who was in
that's
charge
another
of
episode.
changing that back then?
I don't
Because
know.
I remember in '92 it was a big deal, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, 91's actually when the vote started, but because Chattanooga had lost the lawsuit, and they had to change the form of government.
Wasn't there other cities that are under that form of government
They're
today?
about 50-50, yes.
Well, I mean, what? Give me one of them. Who else is like that? Like it was.
You mean like,
Like we were.
I believe Athens is.
no, Athens city manager.
That's right. You're right.
How about Charleston? Mayor and 2 commissioners.
Charleston has mayor and 2 commissioners, and they get along well.
We got along well. I don't know what I just don't know why sometimes we change stuff when there's nothing wrong.
Reinvent the wheel is what that's
Reinvent the
called.
wheel.
Yeah.
Create a problem where there's not a problem.
Right. Well, I think they thought they were taking politics out of it. You can't take politics out of it. I mean, it's there. People either like you or don't like you. They're going to vote for you or against you if they vote. I mean, you don't take politics out
Well,
of
I'm
it.
sort of like when I endorsed Kevin, the fire was biting at me, and when it came on up to,
Of course, you endorsed.
well, I endorsed the old form of government too.
That's right. Oh, you did?
Yes.
I'll tell you a good one, Tom, about when you endorsed Kevin.
Didn't he endorse him before it was something?
I was pleased when he endorsed him, and I
was
thought,
too.
man, that'll help. And I think it really did help. Now you stirred up a lot of flack.
Well, if
But-
Tom loves him, if Tom likes him, we love him.
Well, there was one big time Democrat that I went to see on Kevin's behalf, And I said, man, I sure would like for you to see your way clear to vote for Kevin Brooks. No way, no way. I said, what do you got against old Kevin? He said, I don't have anything against Kevin, but said, Tom Rowland is picking the mayor.
See, that was.
And I said,
What was he
well, I
supposed to-
tell you what, and I shouldn't have said this. I said, you all are the one that started it. He said, what are you talking about? I said, I remember when Buford Ellington and Frank Clement used to leapfrog over each other being the governor. One would endorse the other one and he'd run again. And he looked at me and he said, well, you're right. But he said, I'm still not going to vote for him.
It turned out okay.
Didn't hurt, did
It
it?
turned out okay.
Well, they did. They thought I was endorsing. I was selecting the mayor,
Well, you were.
You were.
but I don't understand it. I mean,
Well, I thought you did a good job, or I wouldn't have been for
I
him.
tried to.
I don't believe you've done much by accident.
I'm still grateful that you did. It didn't matter what they print in the paper. The coronation of Kevin, I think is what they call it.
Yeah.
Let me tell you a story while we've got a little lull here. When I was city commissioner, I was in my office down at City Hall, and Harry Deathrow's office was close, and Gloria Malone was the lady that screened the people coming in. And I heard this sweet young voice say, I need to know where to go buy a business license. And Gloria said, okay, it's so-and-so and so-and-so. And the lady said, we're here. We found a location. We're going to put a massage parlor in.
Oh Lord.
Well, by this time,
Death row steps in.
by this time, I've got interested enough that I got up from my desk and went out the office door to see what was going on. Well, old Harry Deathrow had heard it too. And I knew Harry Deathrow well enough. His face would get about the color of Tom's shirt.
It was soft before it got very far away.
When he was upset, boy, that face would turn red when he's mad. He came out and he said, young lady, what kind of license did you say? She said, we found a location here in Cleveland and we're gonna open a massage parlor. He said, no ma'am, you're not gonna open a massage parlor in my town. And he called it not in a bragging kind of way. He really felt that way.
It was his town.
It was
yeah.
his town. He said, not in my town. She said, now we've already been through the legal part of this. Everything we're doing is legal. And we need to know where to buy the license. He said, young lady, you didn't evidently hear me. He said, you're not going to put a massage parlor in my town. He said, if I have to come down there personally with an axe and chop it up, I will. And he just turned around and went back in his office. And the ladies left. We never heard from them again. They didn't buy a license.
Now the stigma's off of that now, right?
Well,
I mean, there's one next door.
Yeah.
It's just different now. isn't
Next
it?
door to where?
Right here.
well, not really. Not what.
It was a different thing.
Yeah, it is a different thing. They,
Oh, I see what you're talking about.
Yeah.
They're legitimate, have a masseur and all that.
Yeah.
And these could possibly, but if you had looked at the two ladies that were there, they didn't look like they were legitimate. They just looked like
Well, back
ladies
then,
of the evening.
Yeah.
Is what they looked like. Maybe they'd have a red light hanging out
Yeah.
down there. But anyway, he.
I've tried to find that in the minutes, by the way. Harry Deathrow saying on the record, not in my town.
Larry Presswood thought the sun rose and set with Harry Deathrow.
Well, he was a good mayor. We've been very fortunate to have Tom and Harry Deathrow, Bill Schultz. Now, we had a wild hair or two in there. I won't name any names, but you know when you've got a good one and when
Well, we
you
had
don't.
one for about 6 months.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
His picture's still hanging up.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very short dates.
Well, but you know when you have a good one and when you don't. I don't know whether I'm going to get to keep my job as financial man for Gary Davis or not. But I don't know whether he's going to run again or not. But I'm not going to ask him that question because, he doesn't need to address
Well, it's 3.5
that.
years, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
4 years and 2 weeks.
Yeah, he hadn't been sworn in
I don't
yet.
know
for
how a
this.
taxpayer wouldn't vote for Gary Davis.
You think Tightwad's a good name for him?
Oh Lord, yeah.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Bill Everett always said your rope gets shorter.
It does.
And
Normally.
Well, you get to, you make one person mad every so often. It just
your rope
Yeah.
does get
Start
shorter.
gets-
to an
It's like,
extent.
it's like compound interest.
it's compound interest.
Yeah, but I tell you what I really think. I think Gary's probably the most powerful politician in Bradley County. I mean, you don't run like he ran last time and carry every precinct in the county. Now, the city's a little different, and Kevin did well. But the county's a whole different animal. Oh, man. There's places out there that I go now that I didn't even know existed when I ran. You know, you really need to touch all the bases in the county, and that's not easy to do.
I was talking to a guy that ran for office recently, and I said, "Hey, don't confuse business with politics." Was I correct? Is it different?
Well, some businesses, I think, benefit from the owner or the manager getting in, and some
But
don't
I mean, as
benefit.
far as operations,
Yeah.
you can't. Can you operate a business, politics like you do a business, and business like you can politics? To me, I just think you can't get them confused. It's two different things.
Yeah, because one of the mayors that Mr. Rowland was talking about, one of the first things he asked for after he came in office was a profit and loss statement. Well, there's not a profit and loss statement.
No,
in
it's an even
government.
statement at best, right?
Yeah, you
You're either balanced or you're not.
yeah, and you know, you don't make a profit. I mean, you know, you just don't.
You could have the wrong person in office, and nobody would know it, and they could run us completely into bankruptcy, and nobody would know it. Am I right?
Yeah, but you'd know eventually because somebody'd have to pay the teachers and all that kind
Yeah,
of stuff.
but when they don't get paid, what happens? I mean,
State
it's not
comes
like
in.
See, right now the comptroller forces Mayor Davis and I to both have a certain number of dollars in reserves, and there's got to be a certain number of dollars in our. As a matter of fact, we got an email this week that, and I'm sure Mayor Davis got the same one, that the comptroller of the state of Tennessee deems our budget to be balanced. It has been officially approved, and I forwarded it to the city manager and our CFO Sean McKay, and it basically gives us the, just like those set of blueprints right next to you have to have that stamp from the state of Tennessee. So does our budget. It's got to be stamped.
Are we in control or are they in control?
I think we are being.
So we can operate within this range as long as we don't get out of it.
It's a safety measure. It's a pressure valve.
Good thing we got it. I guess.
I think so. There are cities. Mayor Davis.
Are there
touched on-
cities that have gone bankrupt?
Oh, 100%.
Oh,
yes.
yeah.
Name
100%.
one.
New York City,
Yeah,
I name one in Tennessee.
I'd say Memphis, Shelby County.
Memphis.
Yeah, Memphis.
What happens?
Well, we come in and take
They
over
changed
schools
the form
and-
of government, and
There's-
they had one of the first county executives.
There's a city right now in West Tennessee that the state is taking over the city. It's in the area of the Blue Oval. I'm sure Gary's heard about this, and they're in default. They're spending more money than they're bringing in, and the state, there is still on the books the ability in statute for the state of Tennessee, the comptroller's office, to come in and take over operations of that city. And it's in part due to the
Like a rescission, or what do they call that when the bank takes over
Yeah,
thing,
it's a
like
rescission.
what's that word?
Foreclosure?
No, the one they do where they come and manage it for you.
I know what you're talking about.
Starts
Yeah.
with an R.
Every city's different because the cities create themselves. So
charter. Yeah.
yeah,
Isn't it just a isn't it just a glorified homeowners association?
some would say that. But let me finish. With county government,
Some would not.
with county government,
I wish you were in office a while and get your butt chewed on. You'd understand.
Receivership.
Receivership.
Yeah, receivership.
Where they control the
But it's
checkbook.
almost impossible with county governments because we're an entity of state government. Now, I often think and have the discussions with state, do you run it or do we run it? You know, we have to have those discussions sometimes. But we only have the authority that they allow you to have.
The state.
Right. We are an entity of state government. That's why all counties are the same.
What's the city?
The cities create themselves.
we have our own
They're their
charters.
own little world, so to speak.
But are they under yours?
no.
No. Ironically, the millions of dollars that are coming from Washington to the states for COVID, all of that ARP money comes to County Mayor Davis. There are 95 checks that are written, one for each county, and then they disperse to the cities, municipalities within their county.
And he's very generous.
But they have a close.
That's a stretch.
Wow, that's a scoop, I think.
The comptroller's office, you know, is
Are they tough?
yes,
Yeah,
and rightfully so because of things that have happened. I don't know of a county that's ever happened to. I don't see how it could in Tennessee, because they're all set up the same. They all have the same responsibilities. And they all have the same oversight. But some cities, and usually when you're talking about cities, it's not a Memphis or something. It's a little town you never heard of out here, and they don't watch them as close as they do counties. And so, it's possible, but they've really clamped down on how governments work. You was talking about business and government. It's not really business and politics. I always tell people government ought to work more like a business. Ought to work more like a business, but it can't operate like a business because you have a profit and loss statement. You're there to make money. Government's not in business to make money. We're in the service business. And we hope to stay in the black based on the revenue that's coming in. And we ought to do things more like a business does when we can, but you can't operate government exactly like a business because it is totally different.
It's true.
And that's confusing to people a lot of times. That should be our goal, working more like a business. You'll have someone running for office for the first time. Well, when I'm elected, I'm going to operate
Yeah.
government more like a
Can't do it.
business. They don't have a clue, although that should be our goal. And so I've always looked at it. Our goal is to be more like a business, but we're actually in the business of service. And it's not going to ever work exactly like a business. So if you can understand the difference there, because you hear that debate a lot, and it's because they really don't understand how it works. We're in the business to serve. Therefore, the sheriff's department is not going to make money. I mean, we spend over $1 million a year for health care alone at that facility out there. So it can't
How
make
much?
money. Over $1 million just on health care for inmates. So there's a lot of things that we're legally
Quit locking them up.
obligated to do that costs a lot of money. And keeping all of those things in check and balanced is,
I could solve that one. Quit locking them up, right? They're not.
yeah, but
It
you
ain't
don't want to be
real bad.
like California and let them out all the time
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
So, you
See,
know,
I'm just the opposite. I'm like lock up more,
Yeah.
and I won't have the problems on the Greenway.
Well, I tell you what, guys, we've been here 2 hours, and I don't know how long Dee is allowing us, but I guess if you could make a closing statement, if you look at local government and even our state representatives, both Senate and representative, we're in excellent shape. I don't ever remember us being in as good a shape with our office holders. Now, there's a councilman or a county commissioner that maybe I would change if I had that authority. But overall, if you look at City Hall and the courthouse and our state boys, Cleveland and Bradley County is in excellent shape. I don't ever remember us being this. Usually we always have got a weak link here and one there, and there's some stronger than others, but overall, I really think we're in good shape.
We live in the best city and county in the
Hub
world. In
of
the world.
Hub of the universe. That's the way I look at it. And I tell, a lot of people don't know what a good garden spot is, but I use that. This is the garden spot of Tennessee, Cleveland and Bradley County.
Let me ask you all this. What are we going to do? There's not a newspaper. There's not a Goldie printing the headlines. The only way that a person can give his statement is through Twitter, which nobody's on around here, or some, but not in the masses. There's no newspaper. You've got to go on WCLE in the morning to be heard. Am I right? Is there
No,
another
you're
place?
wrong.
Well, where is it?
No,
then?
you're the discussion.
The discussion.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dee.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dee.
I
Thank you,
love,
Dave. Enjoyed it.
I love all
Steve,
y'all.
thank you so much.